everybody, welcome to my channel.
Charles Laughton was one of those rare, shape-shifting talents who could walk into a scene and instantly bend its gravity toward himself. He wasn't just an actor, he was a full-body storyteller. A performer who understood how to wield voice, posture, silence, and contradictions to create characters that felt messy, human, and unforgettable. Born in 1899 in Scarborough, England, Laughton grew up far from the glamorous orbit of the screen. His parents ran a hotel, and for a while he dutifully followed that path. Working in the family business before a spark for the stage pushed him toward London's Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. Turns out, he had the kind of presence teachers can't manufacture: fearless, expressive, and a little mischievous. By the early 1930s, he was already a standout on stage and transitioned quickly into film. Laughton's Hollywood breakthrough came fast. In 1933 alone, he played Nero in The Sign of the Cross, the terrifying Captain Bligh in Mutiny on the Bounty, and Henry VIII in The Private Life of Henry VIII, the performance that won him an Academy Award. The man went from raging emperor to tyrannical sea captain to a lusty, unpredictable king without missing a beat. That range became his signature. What really set him apart was his fearlessness with character work. He leaned into ugliness when a role required it, but he could just as easily pivot to warmth or vulnerability. His turn as Quasimodo in The Hunchback of Notre Dame, 1939, is a prime example. Beneath the heavy makeup and physical contortions, he found a tenderness that made the character's pain feel raw and immediate. Audiences didn't just watch him, they felt him. Off-screen, Laughton had a curious, restless creative mind. He loved language, literature, and the craft of performance itself. That fascination culminated in the one film he ever directed, The Night of the Hunter, 1955. It's wild to think he only directed once, because the movie is now considered one of the most haunting, visually stunning thrillers ever made. At the time, though, it baffled critics and flopped commercially, a disappointment that stung Laughton deeply. He never directed again. But the film's long-delayed recognition has cemented him as a visionary behind the camera as well as in front of it. Throughout his life, Laughton remained dedicated to mentoring younger actors, teaching workshops, and helping others unlock emotional truth in their performances. His marriage to actress Elsa Lanchester was both a creative partnership and a complicated relationship. But the two stayed connected through decades of stage and screen work. Charles Laughton died in 1962 at the age of 63. Leaving behind a legacy of characters that still jump off the screen with surprising freshness. He wasn't conventionally handsome, he didn't play it safe, and he didn't chase the easy roles. He chased the interesting ones. And in doing so, he carved out a reputation as one of cinema's great chameleons, a performer whose work feels intensely human even today. Early life and the call of the stage. Laughton's upbringing in a well-off hotelier family came with expectations, but he never quite fit the mold of the polished, business-minded successor his parents wanted. He was sensitive, introspective, and absolutely fascinated by storytelling. When he served in World War I, he witnessed the horrors that stayed with him all his life. After the war, he returned home restless, searching for something that felt honest. He found it at RADA, where his intensity immediately set him apart. While others worried about technique, Laughton worried about truth and emotion. Even his earliest stage performances were described as strangely compelling, like he had some private universe behind his eyes. Hollywood. The meteor rise. When he arrived in Hollywood, he wasn't the typical matinee idol type. Stocky, expressive, and refreshingly unpredictable, he was the opposite of the glamorous leads dominating studios at the time. But producers quickly realized that he was something better, a powerhouse. His portrayal of Henry VIII in The Private Life of Henry VIII made him a household name. Audiences loved how he made the king both monstrous and oddly relatable. He could make you laugh 1 second and recoil the next. That tension became the hallmark of his screen persona. As Captain Bligh in Mutiny on the Bounty, 1935, Laughton delivered one of his most famous performances, stiff, icy, and terrifyingly authoritarian. Critics praised his ability to evoke fear without caricature. Even when he played villains, he rarely played them as flatly evil. There was always some hint of insecurity or longing underneath, something that made his characters feel alive. The vulnerable giant beneath the booming voice and commanding presence, Laughton was deeply insecure. He worked obsessively, often worrying that he wasn't good enough. That vulnerability made its way into his roles, especially in The Hunchback of Notre Dame. His Quasimodo isn't just tragic, he's heartbreakingly human. Laughton spent hours perfecting every movement, every tortured expression, every flicker of hope or despair. All that effort shows. Even today, his performance is regarded as one of the most emotionally authentic in classic cinema. The teacher and mentor later in life, Laughton poured himself into teaching. Actors flocked to his private workshops not just because he was famous, but because he had an almost mystical ability to pull emotion out of people. He encouraged actors to dig into their fears and insecurities, to use the messy parts of themselves instead of hiding them. Many who studied under him credited Laughton with changing the way they approached performance entirely. He also worked with screen legends, coaching them quietly on major projects. For example, he helped Robert Mitchum refine aspects of his performance in The Night of the Hunter, even while directing him. The Night of the Hunter, a misunderstood masterpiece. This film deserves its own spotlight. Laughton approached it like a piece of dark, lyrical poetry, drawing on German expressionism, Southern Gothic storytelling, and fairy tale surrealism. He created a world that felt half nightmare, half fable. From the stark shadows to the haunting hymns, everything about the film was intentional. But audiences at the time didn't know what to make of it. Critics weren't ready for something that's stylish and bizarre. Its commercial failure crushed Laughton emotionally, and he retreated from directing forever. The tragic twist is that decades later, the film would become a revered classic, studied in film schools for its boldness and emotional depth. Today, it's widely considered one of the greatest American films ever made. Personal life and final years. Laughton's marriage to Elsa Lanchester was both affectionate and unconventional. They supported each other professionally and personally, even though their relationship didn't look like the typical Hollywood romance. They were companions, confidants, creative partners. Throughout the 1950s, Laughton remained active in film, television, and teaching, but his health steadily declined. He passed away in 1962 from cancer. His death was mourned quietly, but his legacy only grew louder with time. Legacy. Charles Laughton didn't just act. He inhabited. He showed that emotional honesty was more powerful than traditional good looks or swagger. Modern actors who lean into vulnerability, who aren't afraid to play unglamorous or deeply flawed characters, are walking in his footsteps, whether they know it or not. His stage work, where the fire started before Hollywood ever tried to claim him, Laughton was a major force on the stage. He tackled Shakespeare, Shaw, and a wide range of contemporary dramas, always with that mix of emotional weight and sly humor people came to expect from him. Critics in London noticed something unusual about him early on. He didn't just play a character. He transformed at the molecular level. His face, his rhythm, even the way he used silence would shift. One of his standout early roles was in Payment Deferred, where he played a morally corrupted bank clerk. His ability to portray guilt and desperation without turning the character into a cliché impressed not just audiences but fellow actors. That role was part of what opened the door to Hollywood, since American producers started paying attention. Laughton also worked with some of the biggest names of the era on stage, including his wife Elsa Lanchester. The two frequently collaborated in theater long before their Hollywood ventures took off. His voice, a secret weapon. Laughton's voice wasn't just a sound. It was an instrument, deep, velvety, articulate, and capable of swinging between menace and tenderness without warning. He used it in unexpected ways. Sometimes he'd push into harsh, clipped tones to express a character's rigidity. Other times, he'd soften into something almost melodic. He had a long-running career doing spoken word recordings and reading literary works aloud, because people genuinely loved listening to him. He recorded selections from the Bible, short stories, and poetry, always with that hypnotic, deliberate phrasing that made even simple text feel rich. His reading of the Gospel of John was so acclaimed that churches and schools used it for decades. Craft obsession. The man who studied everything. Laughton wasn't casual about anything artistic. He was the kind of person who studied human behavior like a scientist. He'd sit and watch people at train stations, restaurants, theaters, quietly cataloging gestures, voices, micro-expressions. He borrowed those details later for his performances. He also had a library that would make most book lovers jealous. Literature, art, theology, philosophy, stagecraft, psychology. If it involved storytelling, he dove into it. That curiosity shows in his work. There's an intellectual engine humming under even his simplest scenes. Collaborations with other film legends. Laughton ended up working with a stunning list of classic-era giants. He shared the screen with Clark Gable, Charles Boyer, Maureen O'Hara, Boris Karloff, Robert Mitchum, Vivien Leigh, and more. Directors loved him because he brought more than a performance, he brought ideas. Even when his characters were designed to provoke fear or discomfort, his co-stars often said he was gentle and funny off camera. He wasn't a diva, just a guy deeply in love with his craft. And because he was so influential as a teacher, young performers in Hollywood treated his advice as pure gold. Some even said a private coaching session with Laughton felt more valuable than a year of formal training. His feelings about fame. Laughton had an odd relationship with fame. He appreciated the opportunities it gave him, but he wasn't the type to bask in applause. He struggled with self-image, often feeling unphotogenic or overshadowed by leading men who fit Hollywood's polished ideal. In interviews, he sometimes hinted that he felt like an outsider in the industry. But that outsider energy is exactly what made him unforgettable. He represented something more honest than perfection. He brought complexity to a Hollywood system obsessed with surface-level beauty. The emotional cost part of what made Laughton great also made his life difficult. He felt things intensely. He poured so much into his work that it drained him. Friends said he carried his insecurities with him everywhere. When his film The Night of the Hunter failed, it hit him harder than anyone realized at the time. That disappointment followed him for the rest of his life. Yet ironically, that same film would eventually be the cornerstone of his legacy. Filmmakers like Spike Lee, David Lynch, the Coen brothers, Terrence Malick, and Guillermo del Toro have cited it as a huge influence. Final years, still a giant even as illness crept in, Laughton kept working, teaching, and performing. His final film performance in Advise and Consent, 1962, directed by Otto Preminger, is a perfect reminder of what he could do. He plays a Southern senator who's charming on the surface but hiding sharp political instincts. It's subtle, sly, layered, and totally magnetic. He passed away the same year, but he never really left. His work gets rediscovered every decade or so by new generations who can't quite believe how modern he feels for someone who started acting in the 1920s. Why he still matters. Charles Laughton represents the kind of actor who doesn't chase glamour but truth. His characters are complicated, flawed, wounded, or defiantly powerful, but always human. That human core is why he remains so compelling to cinephiles today. His skill with comedy, the side people forget. Laughton is remembered mostly for the heavy, intense stuff. But he had razor-sharp comedic instincts. He loved absurdity, irony, and characters who were just a little off balance. In films like Ruggles of Redgap, 1935, he played a prim British valet suddenly dropped into the wild American West. Instead of playing it stiff, he leaned into the softness and sweetness of the character. The famous Gettysburg Address scene, where he delivers Lincoln's speech to a saloon full of rowdy cowboys, is still genuinely moving. This was the magic of Laughton. He could make comedy feel dignified and give dignity a sense of humor. Even in roles that weren't outright comedic, he knew how to use timing to undercut tension or reveal vulnerability. He was one of those rare actors who understood that silence can be funnier than a punchline. His filmography, a little tour. Here are some of his standout films and why they matter. The Private Life of Henry VIII, 1933, his Oscar-winning role. Wild, gluttonous, funny, and somehow still sympathetic. Laughton basically defined how pop culture imagines Henry VIII. Mutiny on the Bounty, 1935, he turned Captain Bligh into one of cinema's iconic authoritarian villains. No overacting, no cartoon cruelty. Just cold, rigid control. Jamaica Inn, 1939, directed by Alfred Hitchcock. Laughton plays a corrupt magistrate with a weird mix of charm and menace. He allegedly meddled a bit in the directing, because he was bursting with ideas. The Hunchback of Notre Dame, 1939, one of the emotional peaks of his career. Heartbreaking, humane, and physically transformative. Ruggles of Redgap, 1935, proof that Laughton could be tender, funny, and quietly heroic. Spartacus, 1960, even with a star-packed cast, Laughton stands out as the witty, politically savvy Gracchus. Advise and Consent, 1962, his final performance. Subtle, warm, layered. He leaves the screen with the grace of someone who knows he's giving his last bow. The writer. He could have been a little-known fact. Laughton wanted to write not screenplays necessarily, but essays, speeches, literature. He had a poet's sensitivity. Friends said he had notebooks full of musings, observations, bits of dialogue, character sketches. He never published them, partly out of insecurity, partly because he poured most of that creative energy into acting and coaching. But if he had pursued writing full-time, he probably would have given us some beautifully strange, thoughtful work. His relationship with Elsa Lanchester, complicated but deep. Their marriage didn't fit the Hollywood fairy tale model, and they didn't pretend otherwise. They were creative partners first, companions second. Both had their own lives and interests, but their bond ran deep. She respected his brilliance. He trusted her instincts. They worked together often. And she stuck with him through career highs, artistic failures, and illness. After he died, Elsa remained fiercely protective of his legacy. She spoke candidly about his insecurities, his brilliance, and the pressures he lived under. The hidden side of his legacy. Influence on modern acting actors today who embrace vulnerability, oddness, or emotional rawness owe a debt to Laughton even if they don't know it. He paved the way for the character.
Bye bye. Thanks for watching. Bye.